At 4:30 they were discharged. Cecil watched as Barry slunk away, trudging down the corridor with a chip on his shoulder. He had snarled and huffed his way through the detention, stabbing out his lines with surly reluctance. Cecil had begun the punishment in resolute mood, thinking that a show of contrition might win him the respect of Mr. Herbert, who sat and marked books at his desk while the boys wrote lines. But as the hour groped slowly by, his enthusiasm waned, and by the time the big hand crawled onto the halfway point of the old cobwebby clock, he felt depressed and weary. Scooping up his school books, Cecil packed his bag and prepared to follow his tormentor out of the room. "Not so fast, Sonny Jim," came Mr. Herbert's mocking tone. Cecil turned to see the teacher beckoning him to the desk. What did the old fool want with him this time? What had he done now? "They're a rum lot, aren't they?" He gestured after the departing Barry. "What is it they call themselves? The Sharks, was it?" "Pikes," said Cecil, immediately regretting it. As much as he despised the gang, there remained an endemic playground loyalty, ruling out any collusion with the authorities, and he wondered if merely imparting its proper name would count as grassing in the gang's eyes. Then again, he knew that Dave especially was always chuffed at the slightest nugget of notoriety, and if Cecil's correction ensured the gang's bad name were spread more accurately, this could only add to its feared reputation. Perhaps Cecil had unwittingly secured the Pikes some staff-room publicity. "It's after the fish that his brother catches," he found himself revealing. "Fish?" Mr. Herbert was all ears. "Yeah, he's got a photo of his brother holding a really big one. He goes with him at weekends, and they always go for the biggest fish." "I see. And I take it this parody of insecure male machismo is extended to the playground, eh?" Cecil looked back uncomprehendingly. "I mean, Dave Channock and his pals rule that yard out there," and he tapped the window, "with an iron fist." Cecil nodded. "They run things," he heard himself saying. It was a phrase Dave often drilled into lesser beings like himself. "Don't forget, this is our yard. We run things here." Cecil felt a burden loosen on him, and a drive to unburden himself further. "They're proper," he willed himself to say it, "bullies," but the word wound itself around his tongue, rolling this way and that, and eventually resurfacing in a much depleted form. "Proper hard," said Cecil, unable to look up. He felt ashamed at his lack of courage. As the teacher took a sip of tea, Cecil felt a closeness to him, or a wish to be closer. A sense of parental properness exuded from him. A receptiveness, a magnetism for confession. Cecil wanted to confide in Mr. Herbert about the Pikes, and how they made a misery of his and almost everybody else's lives. If he brought it up at home, tried confiding in his mum or dad, he was always told they were too busy. Everyone was too busy in the outside world, it seemed to Cecil. Everyone was always rushing about, racing for buses, chasing deadlines, caught up in a scramble for something they could not define. Whatever it was, it didn't seem to make anyone happy. But in his old-fashioned blazer, with his learned-looking beard and his strange expressions, Mr. Herbert seemed happy, or perhaps not happy, but very clever. He seemed to understand things, to know about how the world worked. Cecil wished that life could be like one of Mr. Herbert's slide shows, a carefully choreographed succession of things that all made sense, fitted together nicely, and were explained. This happens, so that happens, and here is what it means. His eyes moved from the teacher in his blazer, looking no less well collected for his cluttered desk, to the yard outside the window. He felt momentarily as if he were delivering his own slideshow, a description of the playground in all its thuggery and ugliness, a concrete battlefield where the armies amassed at times in blatant bellicosity, more often in subtle manifestations hidden to the eyes of staff. From up here you could see the narrow paths snaking round the bankings, the dingy passages linking the car park with the science block, all the geometry of the Pike's stronghold laid out below like a chessboard. They controlled it all, like a cancer riddling the veins of a body. The naive teachers thought they were in charge, but Dave had his spies and henchmen stamping his authority, holding sway over his own and all the younger year groups. He had arrangements with the older years, paid protection to feared fifth formers, and extracted it from unfortunate contemporaries. Even here, in the teacher's lair, Cecil knew that he was putty in Dave's hands. He could feel them closing in on him, feel their breaths on his neck, Barry's stubby little fingers grabbing his collar, see Gary's snickering leer, hear Dave's demonic laughter rattling out of him like the shots of a gun. "I've said too much," he realised, snapping back to life. "I've got to go home, sir. My mum will be on at me for being late." "Of course," conceded Mr. Herbert, shuffling after him. But wait." As Cecil reached the door, the teacher held it back, and for a moment Cecil wondered if he were about to turn on him, almost flinching at the expected blow. Instead, he stooped to look Cecil in the eye, and Cecil saw for the first time just how very old he looked. The sunken bags beneath his eyes, the grey wisps of hair straggling from his skull, the face a haggard bag of wrinkles, almost jaundiced. He had teeth missing, chipped and black. "Don't forget," croaked Herbert, who now seemed vaguely pathetic in Cecil's eyes, "make sure you report any bullying to the—" But Cecil had already set off down the hallway.